So now this next flowchart and video, we'll finish up our look at glial cells within the nervous system of those organisms that have more advanced nervous systems like vertebrates. So glial cells are, again, to reiterate, support cells. They're going to support the cells that are in the nervous system. Those are the axons doing the work, and they're going to make sure that the cell bodies get the necessary nutrients. Basically, they're going to make sure that the axons are nicely myelinated, etc. We're going to continue looking at these supporting functions with the next three types of glial cells. So, the next type of glial cell to look at are my favorite. They're called microglia. Microglia are going to be also found near the nervous system. Okay, they're basically, I should say central nervous system. So they're still part of the CNS, found near CNS blood vessels. So they are going to be patrolling the blood vessels that are going to be going into the central nervous system, like the brain. The reason why I like microglia the most is because these are glial cells that are part of the CNS, but they are basically the CNS, they're immune cells. Okay, it's the immune cells of the CNS. So the central nervous system, because of this blood-brain barrier, does not get all of those white blood cells, let's say, that can access the rest of the body. It gets very specific immune cells known as microglia. Okay, and these are going to be very nicely adapted cells that are great at making sure that pathogens and foreign invaders are destroyed as quickly as possible, because guess what? You're in the brain. You don't want anything foreign chilling in the brain. You don't want anything foreign getting anywhere near or past that blood-brain barrier. Let's say, just in case, you have these patrollers by the blood vessels where the blood-brain barrier basically is, making sure that nothing crazy comes in or out. So what we can state basically about the microglia function is that they function as phagocytic cells. They are phagocytic in their function, meaning that this is basically cell that eats, and this is going to be broadly stated as the fact that microglia, I would say, eat foreign invaders. They consume them, make sure that they die. They get rid of cell debris. So sometimes cells, they may die off. They may kill themselves if they're infected, let's say. And so those cells that are infected and have just killed themselves, undergone apoptosis, those are going to be cleaned up by these central nervous system immune cells called microglia. So those are basically two very simplified ways of thinking of microglia. They do a lot more than this, but generally speaking, they are the immune cells of the microglia, the patrollers, and making sure that nothing foreign comes in. So, moving forward, in addition to microglia, there's another type of glial cell, and that would be Schwann cells. So these are of particular notice because these are the peripheral nervous system glial cells. So this is the first time we see PNS. They are going to function almost identically like the oligodendrocytes, just that the difference will be that they function in the peripheral nervous system. So that means that they will have a plasma membrane rich in that lipid material. What was that called again? Was myelin, right? Just want to make sure you're paying attention. Plasma membrane rich in myelin. Myelin that's produced is going to basically allow for that saltatory conduction. So these cells will produce myelin right next to the axon, right on top of the axon that they're near. So myelin sheath, that's what it's typically referred to as, around the peripheral nervous system axons, okay, PNS axons. And what is this going to allow for? This is going to allow for better transmission of messages. It's going to allow for a much more efficient impulse that's going to be generated through these axons, much like the oligodendrocytes did. Only difference, peripheral nervous system in Schwann cells, or Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system, oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system. Be able to differentiate those. Final glial cell that we'll look at, the final cell that helps support this very important nervous system, are known as radial glia. These are actually the earliest glial cells because they are going to function during a very important time of your life, or the development of your life, and that is during embryonic development. So their job will be to make sure that, embryonically speaking, these nerve cells that are being made at very early stages are going to be made correctly. How so? What is this function going to create? Basically, radial glia are going to form tracks, okay? So they form these very specific tracks. With these tracks, or on these tracks, you're going to have the following. The newly formed, as you're embryonically developing, there's going to be newly formed neurons. These neurons are going to be as a result of, very specialized differentiation, organogenesis, this whole idea of making specialized things within this developing embryo. Those things, let's say in this situation, are neurons. Those will migrate. They have to get to the right place after they're made. So their newly formed neurons are going to migrate from the neural tube. That's basically their origin, if you remember when we looked at an example of organogenesis. And how are they going to migrate from the neural tube? This is going to be by moving along those tracks. Move along the tracks to correct place, let's say, wherever they need to be as a part of this developing nervous system. Whether they're going to be peripheral nerves or central nerves, doesn't matter. Those neurons will get to the right place because these tracks were formed by the radial glia to make sure that these are directed, these neurons that are embryonic are directed to the right spot. That covers our look at glial cells. What we're going to now be looking at in more detail, now that we understand the things that help the nervous system, we're now going to be looking specifically at the nervous system in more detail by looking first at the central nervous system in the next video.